What happens if a reasonably expected outcome fails to occur again and again and again? Now, we've all had experiences where something that we expected to occur didn't, right? There was that stock that tanked, the job offer that didn't come through, there was the 1998 Super Bowl. That one still hurts. We know that life is filled with randomness and some disappointment. But when can we conclude that it's not random chance that's conspiring against us, but the system? One of my very favorite scenes is from the beginning of the play, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. In that scene, Guildenstern is tossing a coin over and over again, and Rosencrantz is betting on the outcome. Rosencrantz bets on heads 92 times in a row, and he wins every time. Think about how it would be to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern if you were them in that situation. How would you think about your system or your world if you could toss a coin 92 times and get heads every time? I wonder, as a mathematician, whether something like this could be happening in our home state of Wisconsin in the political realm. So Wisconsin is divided up into 99 political districts, and each district elects one representative to the assembly in Madison. Now, we have two major political parties in Wisconsin, and you could reasonably expect that one political party's representation in the assembly could at least reasonably represent the proportion of popularity they have across the state. But that's not what's happening. And I want to be careful. So I want to speak to you as a mathematician, not as a partisan. So I'm going to avoid referring to the political parties by name. Since we're in Wisconsin, I'll just call them the beer party and the cheese party. So here's what's happening. The cheese party is winning seats in the assembly, in the government, in a proportion that far exceeds what we see around the state in terms of their overall popularity. So for example, in the 2016 assembly election, the cheese party won just over half the aggregate assembly vote, but they ended up winning almost 2/3 of the seats in the assembly. And in 2018, it was even a little bit starker. The cheese party won less than half the aggregate vote, and they still won almost 65% of the seats. So a reasonably expected outcome, proportionality, is failing to occur again and again and again. The data points that I've given you are not cherry-picked. These things are happening in our state assembly, in the state senate, in our US congressional districts. So is this just bad luck? Is this bad luck on the part of the beer party? Or could it be something in the system? So that's the question I want to explore with you for a few minutes today. Some people wonder if maybe the disproportionate results that we're seeing in these elections could be the result of the redistricting process. So this is the process that occurs every 10 years when those district lines are redrawn. It's because of the changes in population that are measured by the census, right? And those district lines, when they're redrawn, certain rules have to be followed. They have to be the same population. They have to be reasonably compact, not too weirdly shaped, and they have to be contiguous. They can't be broken up into separate pieces, right? But there's a lot of flexibility otherwise in that process. And in 2012, the last time those lines were drawn, the Cheese Party held majorities in the state assembly, in the state senate, and they held the governor's office. And so there's a question. Did perhaps the Cheese Party gerrymander the state? And by that, we're asking, is it possible that they redrew those lines in such a way to achieve a political advantage? Now, there's a lot of different ways you can do that, and the simplest ways are sometimes called cracking and packing. Cracking is what occurs when you recognize your political opponents have a concentration of power in a particular area, and you draw those lines in such a way to dilute that power so that your political opponents no longer have sufficient concentration to win a district. They've been cracked. Packing is doing the exact opposite. You recognize that concentration of power, and it's large, and so you draw the district lines to enclose that. And you concede that district to your political opponents, but then you've strengthened your position in the adjacent districts. So that's cracking and packing, two basic ways of doing gerrymandering. And this matters, right? So if we're going to have a representative democracy, then our representation in the assembly should reasonably reflect the demographics of the state, right? Moreover, one of the things that happens with gerrymandering is it tends to create safe districts on both sides, safe districts on the left and safe districts on the right. And what that means is that challenges tend to come from the extremes. On the left side, on the liberal side, we get more left-wing candidates, and on the right side, we get more right-wing challenges. There's no question that gerrymandering across the country has been one major source of the hyperpartisanship we see today. But how can you tell? How can you tell whether gerrymandering has occurred? So there is some demographics in the state that might explain some of this. The beer party tends to congregate in the urban centers in Milwaukee and Madison. And the cheese party tends to be out in more of the suburban and rural areas. So maybe that accounts for some of these disproportionate election results that we see. We can't look into the eyes or the minds of the legislators who drew those district lines and know what they were thinking when they did that. And they're certainly not talking. So how do we tell? Well, analysts use some different techniques. One technique is the geometric, where you just look at the shapes of the districts, and if they're very far from a more regular kind of shape, there's ways of measuring that and thinking about collecting evidence for gerrymandering that way. A slightly more sophisticated method is to use demographic tools and count how many wasted votes there are for one political party for another in a district. But I want to challenge you today to think about gerrymandering in a different way. Maybe the way that mathematicians or statisticians would think about it, from the standpoint of probability. The way maybe Rosencrantz and Guildenstern would think about it if they were mathematicians. So I'm going to step back to them for a second. So if you toss a coin 92 times in a row, you are not going to get heads every time. The odds of that occurring are minuscule. But what if it wasn't as obvious as that? What if instead of tossing a coin 92 times, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern had tossed a coin 10,000 times? And instead of getting all heads, they got 52% heads. Okay, how does that sound? So you expect when you toss a coin, you'll get about 50% heads. Maybe you'll get a little bit less, maybe you'll get a little bit more. Is 52%, is that strange or not? Okay. As a mathematician, one great tool we have is simulation. So that's what I want to think about here. So I have the power of a computer at my fingertips, so I'm going to use it. And I'm going to toss a coin 10,000 times. Oh, there, I just did it. Okay? I did it, and I got 4,929 heads. So I got about 49.3% heads. I'm going to make a little dot to record that. And then I'm going to do it again. All right, this time I got 49.8% heads. I'll make a little dot there and record that. I do it again. Okay, this time I got a little bit more than 50% heads. I'll record that. So I'm going to do this process, tossing a coin 10,000 times. I'm going to do it over and over and over again. In fact, I'm going to toss a coin 10,000 times, and I'm going to do that trial 1,000 times and record the results. And that's what we're seeing. So what happened? All right. So what we see in this distribution is that, sure, sometimes I got less than 50% heads in those trials. Sometimes I got more than 50% heads, but usually I got around 50% heads. And here's the thing. In none of those 1,000 trials of 10,000 tosses of a coin did I ever get as many as 52% heads. It wouldn't happen. So if Rosencrantz and Guildenstern were mathematicians and they tossed a coin 10,000 times and they got 52% heads, they would know that there was something wrong with their world, or at least with their coin. All right. So what does this have to do with gerrymandering? So what some really smart mathematicians, statisticians have suggested is that we can do the same thing with district plans. So here's what they say. They say, take a set of election data. Let's say the data from the 2012 election, where we know where people voted, how they voted in each precinct. And then we'll take our district plan, our current 2012 district plan, and we'll make some random changes to it. We'll flip a precinct from one random district to another adjacent district and flip a precinct back. And then we'll make a change over here to a precinct and flip it back. And we'll make these random changes, hundreds of them, random across the state, and then we'll freeze it. And then what we've done is we've created a brand new random district plan. Then we'll take that same election data from 2012 and apply it to that district plan. The voting hasn't changed. The people haven't changed their votes. Where they voted hasn't changed, but what's changed is what district some of them are in. And then we'll track how many seats the Cheese Party won. All right. And then we'll do it again. Starting with our original district plan, we'll make these random changes, freeze it, apply that same election data to it, count how many seats one party won, the Cheese Party. And we'll do this process again and again and again. All right. So these really smart statisticians, Ravier, Hirschlag, and Mattingly, what they did is they did this process 19,000 times. So they created 19,000 new district plans at random. And this picture shows the three really powerful takeaways. Number one, it matters, right? So using these random plans with the same election data, the Cheese Party wins between 50 and 60 seats. And we know that an assembly where the Cheese Party has a 50 to 49 edge is very different from an assembly where the Cheese Party has a 60 to 39 edge. It matters. Second, it's notable that the Cheese Party does seem to have a demographic, a natural edge, right? So they won 47% of the statewide assembly vote in that 2012 election. But under the random plans, most of the time, about 85% of the time, they win between 53 and 57 seats. Without doing any gerrymandering, the Cheese Party does have an advantage. It's built in, the way the people are arranged around the state. Right? But finally, here's the big takeaway, is that in that election of 2012, the Cheese Party won 60 seats. That is way outside what we could reasonably expect. This is somewhat akin to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern getting 52% heads in 10,000 tosses of a coin. It shouldn't happen. This is convincing to me that we have a gerrymandered state. So, as a mathematician, again, I don't want to think like a partisan. I want to think like a mathematician, and I also want to look forward, not backwards. So I don't want to look back at the 2012 redistricting. I want to think about now. Right now, we have a district process. Our lines are being redrawn again following the 2020 census. And it is absolutely critical to our representative democracy that those lines be drawn, not to make things necessarily equal, but to better reflect the demographics of the state. And that's not a question of left versus right or cheese versus beer or Republican versus Democrat. This is an issue of American democracy.